Okay.
This meeting is being recorded.
Shall we start with the outline of the book? Or what did you get out of reading the book?
Hold up, I gotta go to my little notes here. Oh, that was from the. Sorry, I saw some underlined things that I did not underline, and I was like, well, "How did those get there?" And then I remembered it's a used book. So let's see. One thing that I felt was pretty important was on page 4 that great writing does not persuade; it takes the reader out of himself. And then directly after that, it was another point that you can draw straight to Collingwood's amusement, and it's the startling and amazing is more powerful than the charming and persuasive. If it is indeed true that to be convinced is usually within our control, whereas amazement is the result of an irresistible force beyond the control of any audience. And I felt like that was kind of playing to the amusement angle. Then on page 5, the points brought up about like the talent of great, I think it was great speech being natural or like inborn compared to like taught, I thought was pretty good. So the quotes are: the products of nature are thought to be enfeebled and debased when reduced to dry bones by systematic precepts. But I say that this will be proved otherwise if one considers that natural talent, though generally a law unto itself, in passionate and distinguished passages, is not usually random or altogether devoid of method. So that it's not naturally inborn for the entirety. It's practiced and can be learned. It still takes the brain. And that I kind of felt like was the setup for the rest of the writing, because that's just mainly what stuck out to me, because it's not inborn, you can learn it, that's important. And then also just comparing it to Collingwood, and I didn't expect those to happen so early on. I expected to get through a little more and then that stuff pop up.
Yeah, no, it's a lot like Collingwood, right?
Yeah.
Deep and powerful emotions, like the artist hopes to be able to communicate, but can't worry about the psychological effect. So but the artists have to have good character, right? They have to put themselves into a frame, a spiritual frame where they will get real insights from what's around them. And then the audience, the critic, has to be capable of appreciating it, right?
Yeah.
So I do think it has, it's similar to Collingwood in a lot of ways. So it's an ancient text, right? So I think it would have more of the essentialist assumptions behind it, that you can find a pattern in greatness because it's somehow related to the human condition. It doesn't pop up from nowhere, but it's a way of responding to human life. So the the other thing is providing vision as opposed to fantasy, right?
Yeah.
So that's important, that you don't present people with something that's just fantastical because you know that they'll respond. So, for example, what if you give an impassioned speech about you can be whatever you want to be, right? Happiness studies. Is that a good speech?
I think it can bend, because I think that a great speech can be delivered to the wrong audience, and then whatever message or power it can have is void, which, I mean, then it no longer has the, not purpose, but the possibility of the great and powerful emotions, and it's kind of stripped of that. But even if it is even great speeches can become corrupt if the meaning is changed. So like, I guess the context between a Trump supporter and a non-Trump supporter for January 6th speech is, one is utterly like riled up and like, oh my God, our democracy is really gone. We got to fix this ourselves. And then the other is like, oh my God, our democracy is gone. This guy's really trying to ruin it. So that great and powerful emotions can, and even the artistic quality of a speech can vary depending on its audience, because I think that it is much more of the relation. There is more of a relationship between the speaker or writer and the audience in speeches than there is for the artistic medium of theater. Because in theater, you are a little dependent on your audience, but for a speech to work, you are almost entirely dependent on your audience. Because without them agreeing, or not so much agreeing as like getting the message, it's kind of lost.
Well, well, the other thing is that people's basic intuitions about good and evil are fundamentally different, right?
Yeah.
Like January 11th or the election, if it was stolen or not, all this stuff. So, and that happened in Greek tragedy, right? In a bad society, the unjust are rewarded, the just are killed, you know? So the question is like, it's important, right, to distinguish between impassioned speech that's motivated by a mistake about good and evil, or by deliberate manipulation, like you know you're lying. So I think all those things, I think when people say, I know what I like, right, in art, and whatever touches my soul is what really matters. I don't think they really know what they're saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In general, they don't like having a gatekeeper, right? Who's to tell me, like with Collingwood, who are you to tell me, that that's not art? But the more you think about it, I think you don't want to end up thinking that a free society has free artistic expression and anybody can call artistic expression whatever they want to.
Yeah.
Have you ever had the experience of having the same play being produced in a way that has the opposite message, or that delivers the opposite based on the director, or that the audience, the message the audience gets is the opposite of what you intended?
That part, I think so. Yes. And then we've also, like when going through and working on the show ourselves as actors before the director even steps in, we have wildly different interpretations of the play. And like one person can be like, oh, well, this is obviously about love. And the other one can be like, well, this is obviously about like love's lost. And then another person who's playing the villain is like, what are you guys talking about? This is definitely about like the tragic story of this guy pining after a woman and then killing her to do it. And then it's like, you can just take in your various meanings. And we could see how the show could be done in any of those ways, but then we went with the one that our director wanted to.
Well, how about it could be about politics, not really about love?
Yeah.
Or it could be about power,
Yeah.
not
Right.
really about love, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, those things get all mixed up together. And what's a memorable experience you had in theater where the message, either did or didn't get conveyed, and you felt like the audience left with a higher level of conscious awareness?
I wouldn't say higher level of consciousness or awareness, but I was talking with Taylor last night about the shows that we had done in the past, because I was going over the script and we were hanging out and we were talking about Arms the Man, which is the first show I was in. and I played Sergius, who was essentially trying to get with the maid while also being engaged to Raina, the daughter of a renowned general. And in the scene with the maid, Luca, he comes off fairly strong. And if it is not played properly on both sides, with Luca being incredibly confident and very obviously knowing what is going on and being like, yeah, you can be into me, but I'm using you to get a higher station. And with him kind of being played as a little bit more aloof, it can come off as a very not good situation. Like kind of more sexual assault than fun. And I think for a lot of the audience, for at least one of those shows, that's how it came off, and that goes really against not so much Sergius, but it definitely goes against Luca's character. So they walked away with a totally different message in those scenes than they were supposed to.
Was there a review of it that you felt understood or didn't understand?
There was, from my mom, who she was a director. She ran the theater program at my high school for years until she decided to swap over to English, and she got it on the first viewing. She understood, but then she knew where it went wrong, and then on the later viewings it got better. So it from the experienced people, yeah, I think the point was kind of there, but it was lost on most, which is not great.
Yeah, okay. So let's see, I'll just go over the overall outline. Yeah, so the purpose of the treatise is education. So again, just like, so philosophy of art can itself be an art, right? The book can be an artistic creation because its goal is to educate. And you get the pleasure of understanding what it is you're seeing without losing the emotion in it. Like it can even help you understand your emotions or understand what a great mind is trying to communicate. And then the other thing that I think is important is that a book like this often gets trashed by deconstructionists because it's privileged white Western men talking about high-mindedness. But my answer to that is that, women can be high-minded, minorities can be high-minded. And I don't think he would be exclusive, right? There are people who don't think they would be, but then they draw the line pretty quickly. But I think at the very end is where the truth comes out, is that he says only in a democracy can you have great speeches. Because in any other kind of government, you're corrupted by motives and your social position. And so, I mean, he understands the power of speech to either nurture a democracy or destroy a democracy. So I do think it would be unfair to just label him one of those privileged white guys. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I was just reading an essay by an Indonesian where he's looking at the masculinity in Red Badge of Courage versus an Indonesian book. And they use all this postmodern jargon. It drives me nuts. Like, there's nothing noble about it. There's nothing, it's just so left-brained analysis, and you can't ever get to any depth of understanding. You don't write about how the person felt very much. I mean, you write for a minute and then you deconstruct it with these 5 categories, and it's just, who are these scholars that that shred everything to death. Um, have you ever had that? No experience, that kind of thing?
I think so. I've I haven't read, well, actually, most of the things that I read aren't breakdowns of other things. It is the thing itself, and then I guess as far as the only thing I can more talk about is like if people just shred film. Like Nope, when it came out, everybody was saying different things, and a lot of it was just the difference in how they felt about Jordan Peterson. Not Jordan Peterson, Jordan Peele. Definitely not Peterson. I hate that guy.
Was it about his masculinity or his?
It A lot of it was like it was just attacks ad hominem. It was just attacks on him for the sake of who he was, like an African American comedian that broke into the horror genre and did very successfully. And a lot of people didn't like that because he had his box and they wanted him to stay in it. Stuff like that.
That's crazy. Um, I don't understand that. That's why I guess I don't get involved. Um, all right. So, oh yeah, remember when in the middle of Ion says, "Oh, Socrates, you moved me so much," right? And
Yeah.
when Socrates gives us a speech that appears to be lauding emotion, pure emotion, right? A poet is a light and winged thing, and reason is not in him. And then oh, Socrates. And then he reveals his real motives, which are money. And so the dialogue indicates this is why you have to tie down your emotions with reason. Like somebody has to make you accountable if you don't make yourself accountable. Otherwise, these guys can get away with anything. And they often don't even know how corrupt they are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so again, we've got this union of emotion uh, and discipline or training or argument. This is the thing that Collingwood is probably a lot more ambiguous about, but in the ancient view, there's nature and culture are integrated. So culture just emerges from nature. So just like in a physical body, in a natural body, everything has a purpose, the whole is relation, it fits in relation to the ecosphere. So the same thing is true for a work of art.
Yeah.
So literary criticism, and you have to be able to understand, you have to be able to know greatness when you see it. People by nature desire to know, they want to transcend themselves. That goes back to Rollo, these ecstatic experiences. There's 5 sources, right? And it can be improved with skill. But for Ion, the skill became the goal, right? Uh, he didn't have inspiration beyond the skill and knowing how to manipulate people. He had a skill for knowing how to stimulate emotions. And he thought that's all you need for sending troops out to war. Right? That's a serious mistake. Okay, so character development, right? So it doesn't really, you don't really split character, action, and thought because people's characters are their thoughts. That's what drives them. And the combination, right? The emotions and the thoughts. And
Yeah.
then, and that's what causes them to make one choice rather than another. So, but I do think, again, there's a genre in the modern world. Everything, there was a solipsism, right? Descartes, solipsism, self absorption, alienation. But that's because culture was split off from nature. So, of course, you're alienated. You don't have a natural referent. Um, But on this view, like it's natural to learn stuff. And how can we learn? Because there's patterns out there as part of our reality as creatures of evolution. Um, what is it they saw, right, that enabled them to break all the rules, right? Um, I remember reading this as an undergrad and going, yeah, that's what I've been asking myself ever since my mother took us to Europe. So then there's the combination of music, rhythm, dance, right? Bringing together all aspects of the human psyche and the body and the mind. And that's what makes the biggest impact. And then this section is historical circumstances, right? When you live in a democracy, you should really take speech carefully and use it wisely. Because if you don't, you're going to lose your democracy, and then all speech is corrupted after that. Does that make sense to you, Liam?
Yeah.
And I just don't think people understand this. They don't take it seriously enough. And, there are a lot of liberals who will just say polarizing things. And, if I tell them you should self-censor, well, you're telling me, censorship. You're not giving me free speech. And I would say, why don't you want to say noble-minded things? Why don't you want to draw people together? Like, what's wrong with you that you wouldn't want to inspire people in ways that create a middle class? What's on your mind, right? Um, so I get disappointed in liberals who aren't emotionally mature. They really should be, because they should value democracy, and it takes emotional maturity to maintain a democracy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And also apathy, indifference. That's really a big problem too, because then evil will creep up on you and you won't notice until it's too late. Okay, so which speeches did you pick?
Okay. So I picked Nelson Mandela's I'm Prepared to Die, Theodore Roosevelt's Muckraker speech, um, January 6th from Trump when he was still on stage, and then Richard Nixon's I Am Not a Herc, because two of those are about corruption and a failure of democracy, and two of those are about, kind of about oppression and kind of the the putting down of certain groups, whether it be workers and hurting the people, or whether it be different races, and about the apartheid.
Did you get any clips from it to play?
Yes, I do have some clips.
Okay.
I have two clips, and then two that have. Actually, no, I have three clips. The only one that didn't have a clip was Roosevelt.
You could read a section of it if you want to, for
Yeah,
why you picked it.
Yeah, I'd have to look for a section, because there was one specific section that I wanted to. So if I can present, I can show those off, if you'd like.
Sure.
Okay, let's table sharing. Okay. I can't share because I think you're sharing.
Oh, no, wait, I can give you access.
Okay, perfect.
Participants, no, on share screen, I can, multiple participants, yeah. There you go.
There we go. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Is it up? Is it running?
Just turn it on.
Do you see the YouTube screen?
Yep, I do.
Okay. Perfect. I will play this.
imaginary hardships, or to use the language of the state prosecutor, so-called hardships. South Africa is the richest country in Africa and could be one of the richest countries in the world. But it is a land of extremes and remarkable contrasts. The whites enjoy what may well be the highest standard of living in the world, while Africans live in poverty and misery. Poverty goes hand in hand with malnutrition and disease. The incidence of malnutrition and deficiency diseases is very high among Africans. The incidence of infant mortality is one of the highest in the world. The lack of human dignity experienced by Africans is the direct result of the policy of white supremacy. White supremacy implies black inferiority. Legislation designed to preserve white supremacy entrenches this notion. I have dedicated my life to this struggle of the African people. I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons will live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an idea for which I hope to live and to see realized. But my Lord, if it needs be, it is an idea for which I am prepared to die.
Hey, my name's Kevin. I'm a
Didn't want the ad to play. Do you want to talk about that any before going to the next one, or?
No, well, what do you think of it?
I think it's powerful, and I think it speaks to one of the things that came up in a debate. I guess debate. It didn't really come out as a debate. It kind of just came out as a conversation. A conversation made yesterday that there is no such thing as a poor country. There are just exploited countries, and countries that have been robbed of their natural resources, countries that have been robbed of the human capital that they could have, countries that have been oppressed, and there shouldn't be any such thing as a poor person, just a person that has been exploited. And I mean, one thing that came up a lot yesterday from one of the other people was that people can just work harder to earn more, and that isn't how it works.
No.
And it would always, for him, it would always default back to that. And that's where eventually he was like, we should just stop talking about economics because we're at an impasse. And I'm like, we're at an impasse because you have one defense. I keep making different points, and then you have that one point. And like I specifically said that at one point, I was like, I am talking about a different thing now, and you are defaulting to the same defense. And it was, a little irritating because there's only so much he could come back to. And I think that is.
Which class was that? Business ethics?
It wasn't. It was actually after class. It was after campaigning 2022 that we just sat down and talked for a while. And I mean, that for the speech in particular, it did speak a lot to the fact that South Africa should not be a poor country. There should not be poor people in South Africa, but there are because of white supremacy and the systemic oppression that they have had to undergo as a people and as a race in a country that they are native to. Like, white people colonized and robbed everything and sent it back to England, and that is a common theme in a lot of African and Asian countries.
Oil, especially.
Yeah.
If an African country has oil, they're going to really get screwed.
Yeah.
I don't know. You just wish it would end, but it doesn't, you know. Like the next wave of colonialism will probably be China, right?
Yeah, they've already started. I mean, there's a joke that Chinese men will go to, I think, East Africa and North Africa and come back with an African wife, and it's not great. It is the start of something that is not great.
Well,
I mean, if they were going and finding love, yeah, that's fine. But they're also building massive amounts of infrastructure so that these nations might be dependent on China and can be like indebted, and then it creates a whole different system and situation.
Yeah. Well, time will tell what happens, but China will probably drop a bomb or so on Taiwan or threaten it, and we'll send all sorts of blood and treasure there, and China will just that's the shiny object, and then they'll go and dominate everything else in the world. Well, our people are just obsessed about like kicking Chinese butt. How many times do we have to make that mistake? It's just but the other issue, with Nelson Mandela, it's just interesting. It doesn't discredit his life, but it's good to make sure to read the whole story. Like his wife got to be a real thorn side, Winnie. And then after he got authority, then the party that took over after him became really corrupt. And this is partly because of the animosity between the parties. And so they honestly think they've got to dominate. They're going to be destroyed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But it's still not a reason not to move forward. Nobody was better off under Dutch rule, right?
Yeah. The Dutch nowadays might be pretty friendly, but they were not a great colonizers to meet.
Right. Yeah, I know. Actually, I know that because of Indonesia. They were ruled by the Dutch. And as opposed to the British, like the British used to build some infrastructure and try to educate some local people a little bit. But the Dutch just, set up their own little community, and apparently were less able to reach out, is what I guess you'd say. But they're nice now, right? There's a lot of Indonesians that study in the Netherlands. There are a lot of Dutch people that come and start NGOs and stuff in Indonesia. So
yeah.
Okay, so what's the next one?
We're gonna flip back and forth between corrupt and not corrupt, because that's a fun time. So next one we're gonna do is just Richard Nixon. I think it's gonna be short. I don't think it's the full speech.
It's a minute and a half.
Yeah. So here we go. Oh, wait.
I made $250,000 from a book and the serial rights, which many of you.
Oh, come on, ABC News. Don't buffer. What a shame.
What does it say?
It's buffering. It's just the logo saying that it is.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm gonna go back 10 seconds and see if that.
In the next 8 years, I made a lot of money. I made $250,000 from a book and the serial rights, which many of you.
Oh, yeah. No, that's unfortunate.
They're just not going to let you do it, huh?
Yeah, they are being a little mean. Let's give it like 10 seconds. And if not, I can try and pull the same thing up on YouTube. Okay, 5 seconds.
That's ABC News. There's YouTube.
That is YouTube, but it's not. Let me just go straight to YouTube. What? Ah, geez.
Here's 2 minutes, 3 minutes.
I'm gonna pull that one up and hope it's the right thing.
Stop using these for.
I don't care, ad. You're not helpful. There we go.
More troubles piled up for the president as Internal Revenue took issue with his tax returns.
Let me just say this, and I want to say this to the television audience. I made my mistakes, but in all of my years of public life, I have never profited from public. And in all of my years of public life, I have never obstructed justice. And I think, too, that I could say that in my years of public life, that I welcome this kind of examination, because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
The public saw the president's moods fluctuating wildly as charges piled upon charges. The impeachment drive gained momentum, and Richard Nixon continued to protest, deny, and defend.
I condemn any attempts to cover up in this case, no matter who is involved. We must maintain the integrity of the White House. And that integrity must be real, not transparent. There can be no whitewash at the White House. What really hurts in matters of this sort is not the fact that they occur, because overzealous people in campaigns do things that are wrong. What really hurts is if you try to cover it up. If I were to make public these tapes, containing as they do blunt and candid remarks on many different subjects, the confidentiality of the office of the president would always be suspect from now on. Those are matters in which the president has a responsibility to defend this office, which I shall continue to do. I am not going to do anything, and I am not going to give up to any demand that I believe would weaken the presidency of the United States. I will not participate in the destruction of the office of the President of the United States while I'm in this office.
Okay, we got some points there. It wasn't a full speech, but we did get a couple of points of contention, and that was the point of what I picked on ABC, is that he is technically defending the office, but he is not defending it against something that is worth defending. He is trying to save himself and using his position to justify a level of secrecy that likely does not need to be there, especially when there is the possibility of everything from corruption to goodness gracious, what's the word? I don't know, backdoor dealings. It's not a great look. Not a great look for him. And a new precedent with a C has been set with January 6th, which we'll get to in a little bit, because we've had some bad presidents, like Andrew Jackson, not a great guy. But with the he didn't try and have an insurrection. He just slaughtered innocent people there after a war was already over, which is pretty bad. That is incredibly bad. But he didn't make large attempts to undermine democracy or the sanctity of the office, as far as I'm aware. And speaking of sanctity of the office, that is a half decent segue into the next speech, which is Roosevelt, specifically his muckraker speech. And we're going to start, I think, right about here. We can start the paragraph before. And he, unless you want to say something about Nixon.
No, but it is really amazing. He was a crook at the time, but Trump is just so much worse. And I guess the thing that the thing that surprises me is that I didn't know anybody who would defend Nixon, but I know a lot of people who defend Trump. I just was in a very closed community without really knowing it. I was like a sophomore in college then.
Yeah.
And I do remember it. I got married that year and had a baby in 74. So yeah, those are pretty vivid memories. But yeah, I mean, it was bad, but it wasn't like Trump. And day after day with Trump, he didn't read anything. He didn't have advisors. I mean, and then the main thing is that a huge chunk of the public don't even know that he's not doing his job.
Yeah.
That's a toughie. Anyway, so it has to do with education. And I think Longinus, like public speeches, have the potential to educate people. Apart from the educational system, but they also have such power to manipulate them. That the art of speech writing is just so incredibly powerful. Yeah. So
I could have pulled up. I was really tempted to pull up. What film was it? I think it was. I know it was Charlie Chaplin.
the great dictator.
Yeah, The Great Dictator, and contrast that with an actual speech of Hitler and how one is poking fun and can be taken completely out of context to be used to be like, well, obviously he knew that Hitler was going to take over the entire Western world. And then looking at Hitler and seeing that and trying to show people like he was incredibly charismatic and he could speak people into contentness or passivity. And he like that is one of the things that is common among most dictators is that they were really good speakers so that they could educate the masses on a more accessible medium, because not everyone can read and write, but almost everyone can listen.
Well,
and
not only that, yeah, he was an artist. And so he employed the best architect, Charles Spear, to build the Brandenburg Gate. I mean, he really understood performance art. And, Trump is just clunky. He has no style. And I don't think Josh Hawley does, or Tom Cruise or DeSantis. But if you get somebody that's really skilled at manipulation, I just really, the American public is kind of, I hope they wake up.
There were a lot of speeches to pull from. Given more time, I think it might have taken me hours to decide, but
that's true. It doesn't matter.
So moving on to Teddy Roosevelt, I don't know when I'm going to stop, but I think whenever I stop, it is going to feel like a good place to stop. So we're gonna see how long that takes. Um, so starting now, it is very necessary that we should not flinch from seeing what is vile and debasing. There is filth on the floor, and it must be scraped up with a muck rake. And there are times and places where this service is the most needed of all services that can be performed. But the man who never does anything else, who never thinks or speaks or writes, save his feet with the muck rake, speedily becomes not a help, but one of the most potent forces of evil. There are in the body of politic, economic, and social many and grave evils, and there is urgent necessity for the sternest war upon them. There should be relentless exposure of and attack upon every evil man, whether politician or businessman, every evil practice, whether it politics, business, or social life. I hail as a benefactor every writer or speaker, every man who, on the platform or in a book, magazine, or newspaper, with a merciless severity, makes such attack, provided always that he, in his return, remembers that the attack is of use only if it is absolutely truthful. The liar is no whit better than the thief, and his mendacity, I think,
Yeah.
takes takes the form of a slander. He may be worse than most thieves. It puts a premium upon knavery, untruthfully to attack an honest man, or even with hysterical exaggeration to assail a bad man with untruth. An epidemic of indiscriminate assault upon character does no good, but very great harm. The soul of every scoundrel is gladdened whenever an honest man is assailed, or even when a scoundrel is untruthfully assailed. I feel like that's a good, but I think the next two or three paragraphs kind of expand the what's it called? Not the severity, but the scope of the danger. And the main point there is a calling to end the filth of both business because of the of muckrakers and the, I mean, this was in response to meatpacking and how dirty and dangerous the food was, and it led to the institution of the Food and Drug Administration, and he then applies it to politics and social life because of the importance of seeing that there is filth and that there is so much that can go unseen without what he calls people to do, without journalists and people trying to write and expose these different things. So I thought that this piece of artwork, this speech, can be used as a call to create more, which I felt like was a good example and thing to bring up.
Was he part of the antitrust breaking the monopolies down? That
I
was,
know
that was the
B was.
Sherman Act. What?
I know. I think Franklin B was. I don't remember how much Teddy was involved on it.
I think he actually was because he was Republican, and so he stood out in that way. Um, but anyway, that is such a big issue right now. So did he say in the first paragraph or so that if all you do is rake the muck, that's not good enough? Um, you have to also do something positive. Um, uh, Rake himself anyway. Um, but okay. Oh, here down at the bottom, a person who never does anything except his feet with the muck rake speedily becomes not a help, but potent force. What do you think that means? That all he is critical, people get.
That
Um,
somebody that is only looking to expose and try and clean out may improperly use their rake. It is to the point, or if they try and use their tools to the point of the tools being all that they can identify themselves by, that it is no longer a help to society and can in fact cause more harm than good. Or I
yeah,
think that's
it's like deconstructing and not constructing anything to replace it.
yeah.
Okay, so that's true because then people just become immune. They don't pay attention anymore.
Yeah.
Um, or they get cynical or whatever. It just doesn't bring about real change.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good. And Teddy Roosevelt did stand out as a Republican who was critical of business, I think.
Yeah, I looked it up. He did come out to Congress saying that he was against the government breaking up monopolies, but they should instead assume power. I need to look at more of that, because if it's just that bit, then he was a lot more left leaning, but I don't think that was representative of his whole view.
Okay.
Okay. And then the last thing I have pulled up is Trump straight from on January 6th, when he was still at the speech. I forgot how long the speech was, and hopefully we get to the points that I want him to make quickly. And once those pass, I will stop it if it's going on too long. Because I think building up from muckraking and Nixon, it is really good to look at this, and then also with compared to Mandela early on, to just kind of expose those not only the racial issues, but also the overtly racist issues, but also it kind of makes you think of more of the subtlety of it. So moving into the last one, I think it was good to go in the order that we did, which is good because I didn't plan that out. That was just lucky. And here is this one.
Please welcome the 45th President of the United States of America, President Donald J. Trump. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you, and it never still today. Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to Detroit, stand
We're just gonna skip the self-pleasure there, because I didn't realize they played the whole song.
Narcissism.
Yeah, it is important for moving forward, and I'm glad we saw the first part, but we do not need to watch that whole bit.
Yeah.
Oh boy, where'd the audio go? Turn it down. What? Are you getting the audio?
to the hills of Tennessee.
Okay, that's weird. I don't know why I'm not getting audio here.
It's funny, you get the music, you don't get the substance.
Yeah, I mean,
Who fixed that?
it is PBS. I'm gonna skip a little bit ahead and see if that'll help.
All over the world,
Yeah,
actually. Going to wreck here.
Okay, so they just messed up the audio.
Media will not show the magnitude of this crowd. Even when I turned on today, I looked and I saw thousands of people here, but you don't see hundreds of thousands of people behind you because they don't want to show that. We have hundreds of thousands of people here, and I just want them to be recognized by the fake news media. Turn your cameras, please, and show what's really happening out here, because these people are not going to take it any longer. They're not going to take it any longer. Go ahead, turn your cameras, please, would you show? They came from all over the world, actually, but they came from all over our country. I just really want to see what they do. I just want to see how they cover it. I've never seen anything like it, but it would be really great if we could be covered fairly by the media. The media is the biggest problem we have, as far as I'm concerned. Single biggest problem. The fake news and the big tech. Big tech is now coming into their own. We beat them 4 years ago. We surprised them. We took them by surprise. And this year, they rigged an election. They rigged it like they've never rigged an election before. And by the way, last night they didn't do a bad job either, if you notice. I'm honest, and again, I want to thank you. It's just a great honor to have this kind of crowd and to be before you and hundreds of thousands of American patriots who are committed to the honesty of our elections and the integrity of our glorious republic. All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing, and stolen by the fake news media. That's what they've done and what they're doing. We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved. Our country has had enough. We will not take it anymore, and that's what this is all about. And to use a favorite term that all of you people really came up with, we will stop the steal. Today, I will lay out just some of the evidence proving that we won this election, and we won it by a landslide. This was not a close election. You know, I say sometimes jokingly, but there's no joke about it. I've been in 2 elections. I won them both, and the second one I won much bigger than the first, okay? Almost 75 million people voted for our campaign, the most of any incumbent president by far in the history of our country. 12 million more people than 4 years ago. And I was told by the real pollsters, we do have real pollsters, they know that we were going to do well and we were going to win. What I was told, if I went from 63 million, which we had 4 years ago, to 66 million, there was no chance of losing. Well, we didn't go to 66. We went to 75 million, and they say we lost. We didn't lose. And by the way, does anybody believe that Joe had 80 million votes? Does anybody believe that? He had 80 million computer votes. It's a disgrace. There's never been anything like that. You can take third world countries. Just take a look. Take third world countries. Their elections are more honest than what we've been going through in this country.
Okay, he has made the main points, and he will reiterate those endlessly until he is walked off the stage, like he should have been. Main points there is he is spreading a large amount of misinformation there. I'm sure you know, and it is not good. He is definitely the dirt in this situation, and compared to previous presidents where it's a nice handshake, they get in the car with the new president for like 5 minutes, and that's the only 5 minutes they're not on air, and they probably just are just like, well, screw you for winning, but have fun in the job or something like that. It's unprecedented. He has set a new low for political what's the word? I don't know. Political winning. Yeah, manipulation. That's winning is not the right word. Yeah, manipulation is good. And as you know, he theoretically incited the incident at the Capitol. He definitely egged them on and talked about everything being stolen and democracy failing, and that he should have it, like a child whining that they didn't get their toy. And it's not great. It's not a good example to set for the rest of the world, for sure.
So what do you think what grade were you in when the 2020 election happened? You were in high school?
I was senior year. I remember we were in class when the January 6th stuff happened, and somebody was like, yo, the Capitol's getting raided. And everybody was like, no way. That wouldn't happen. That nobody would try and raid the United States Capitol. And then our teacher looked it up because they were like, no, that's not real. but they were concerned because they were more up to date on what was happening than we were. And eventually, I think I was in Miss Petty's class, who is a Republican, did not really like Trump, voted for him, but didn't really like him. And she was kind of taken aback. She was like, no, there's no way this is really happening. So we pulled up a live stream and we just played it. And that was really the rest of the day. In almost every class that I went to for that day, it was just the riots were on. Because like, what else do you do? That is a massive, massive thing that is happening in our country. And we were all just kind of in disbelief because we were like, how did they get this far down the rabbit hole that they're raiding the Capitol? And I mean, there were Trump supporters at my high school for sure. I didn't have classes with many of them, and even Abby, who ran Young Republicans, was like, "There, no way. Why would they do this? That's stupid. They shouldn't do that." And like, it was kind of a unanimous thing where we were all like, "This is not good." Like nobody would say. Sorry, you go.
What about when you were in 8th grade and Trump got elected?
I remember nobody thought that it was going to turn out the way that it did. Like, we all made small bets. We were like, oh yeah, I bet, oh heck, who was it? I bet Hillary's going to win because she has the record. Another person was like, oh, well, Trump's going to win. I mean, he's so cool. And other people were like, haha, Trump funny man. And I was my school had a program going on. And it was basically like, we go and shadow people at jobs at different places. And I was shadowing at the Arkansas State Capitol, which I feel like is really funny looking back. And I just met Asa Hutchinson the day before the election, I think. And then it was one of the days that we were up there. I don't remember if it was right before. And then I went home that night and I was like, you know what? I bet that when I wake up, Hillary will have won and everything is going to be funny. And I can go make fun of my friend Ainsley after she does. And then I woke up in the morning and I checked the results and I was like, oh, that's not what I thought would happen. It's like, I went to bed fully confident. My parents stayed up watching it and they were like, what? No, that's not supposed to happen. And it was a bunch of really weird things that all kind of went together. And nobody really talked the day after that happened. I mean, we didn't go to school. We went to shadow at the jobs and nobody really said anything. Like, even the people we were shadowing were just kind of quiet. And I mean, even all of the students were just kind of quiet. There were like 4 of us at the Capitol and we kind of stayed in a group because it's easier to keep track of kids when they're together. And it was a different mood before and after. Same thing with the riots.
So did that change the trajectory of your life? Like, so I was in 9th grade, 10th grade when Martin Luther King got shot on my birthday or my birthday party. And I just decided, I think I want to grow up, right? I think I want to change and be serious. But I'm wondering, did that ever change your orientation? Like, did that affect why you wanted to go in philosophy or?
Looking back, I mean, the main thing that it changed in that immediate moment was that, like, I had made a bet that I'd ask a girl out if Trump did win, and he did win. And that changed almost nothing. It was just a funny thing between me and 2 other friends. One of the friends being the person I was going to ask out. And that made no immediate change. But then moving forward, it was eventually like I saw more sensationalized people. And I think that I started to kind of see the fact that politics isn't like these really smart people all trying to govern the country. It's more of a game. Where, like, being at the Capitol at that specific time, I was like, there are a lot of smart people here doing pretty cool work. And I mean, we even got to see old maps of all the major buildings in Little Rock because the historians had maps down there. And I mean, we just spent like a day with them just looking at maps and we thought it was super cool. Going and seeing a reality TV star get elected. And that was just kind of this like things aren't quite what I thought they were. And then I think on January 6th, almost everybody at my school that watched it were either like, well, yeah, it's bread and circus. Like there is no actual substance to any of these politicians. This was just a matter of time. And then other people like me were just kind of like, oh my God, this is not quite how democracy is supposed to work.
Yeah, but it's
And I'm
very
not,
discouraging when people say they're all the same. They're
yeah,
not all the same. They're
yeah,
really, really different.
yeah. And some people who don't, what's the word? People who don't benefit from politics are more likely to say that they're all the same because there's nothing happening for the bottom or the lower like economic classes. And I think that
They do benefit though, because their air could be dirtier and their water could be dirtier
yeah,
and their schools
and
could be worse.
a lot of my friends, like friends on the football team, knew that, like they knew, but they still didn't trust politicians. They didn't think that much was ever going to change. It was just kind of going to move slightly towards a cleaner time because eventually some people would realize, oh wait, maybe even if my kids are rich, they still might be coughing every time they go outside and stuff like that. But as far as January 6th and the actual election of 2016 changing my life, right now it is hard to say how much it influenced me, but I think given more time to reflect, I would probably have a better report for you.
Well, I mean, I didn't go into philosophy because it was politics, you know.
Yeah.
There's something more than politics. So I'm just curious about what is it that you were curious about that made you get interested in philosophy?
One of the things is my dad. My dad is a college dropout.
Mhm.
He drives a truck, which means he has a lot of downtime and a lot of time to think. And even before he was driving a truck, he slowly started getting interested in philosophy because it was one of the things that like he never got to explore in high school. He never got to explore in college because he went to college for photography, which was a medium that he absolutely loved. And then once he had to do it for about a year or I think two for school, he couldn't do it anymore because it was just too much. And it was taking the medium that he loved and it was making it so much worse. And eventually he worked in film and that's where he met my mom. And eventually he started getting into the Stoics, specifically like Marcus Aurelius. And then eventually the Daily Stoic became a thing. And he doesn't really like that as much because he feels like it's kind of it takes actual stoicism and it makes a different twist on it that kind of just feeds into the, I guess, hustle culture, if you will, like the whole rise
Oh
and
yeah.
grind stuff. He doesn't really like because he doesn't see that as a viable way to live. um, and he was always to me and my other siblings, he would always say, you can ask questions, just make sure they're the right questions, because if
Okay.
they weren't, people won't want to answer. So to my brother who followed economics all the way through, when he got to college, my dad encouraged it. To my sister who wants to be an engineer and go work for Formula One, he encouraged it. And to me, who is studying philosophy and doing that, he is encouraging. And he is one of the main reasons that I think all of us pursued the studies that we wanted to and not the studies that we thought would get us somewhere, because he saw that sometimes those things don't work. Another reason is that my mom is a teacher, and now she is an assistant principal at Lone Oak. Like that started this year, and she did not have the normal experience. Yes, she went to college right after high school, but then she worked in film, and she was the location scout for the entire film industry in Arkansas. So if anybody came to film in Arkansas, she was the person that they'd go to find out where they were going to shoot and like what they would do for certain shots and like what might be better. And of course, that's where she met my dad. And then eventually she started teaching and she taught speech and drama. And then eventually she moved on to English, and she was the only teacher for almost 15 years without a master's degree. And then while around where COVID hit, she was working on her master's degree. It was entirely online. So that didn't change too much on her end. And like she kind of showed me and my siblings that you don't have to know what you're doing right off the bat. You just have to worry about living a good life. And worrying about living a good life is a driver for me because I don't really know where I'm going to end up. I know that if I want to teach that, or if I want to be a professor, yes, it is, I can go the standard route and go straight for the PhD and then stay in institutions for my entire life, or I can try and get out and go do more things so that way I have more stories and more life experience. So that way everything that I've learned isn't just in the context of learning it. Because that, yeah,
Yeah,
and that's
it's,
kind of where I am.
yeah, okay. Well, it is interesting what you get rewarded for. It's just making your life into a story about talking to other people about what Aristotle said or what
Yeah.
Plato said. And that's not what they said you're supposed to do.
Yeah,
Right.
it's like yesterday in our conversation, I brought up utilitarianism, and almost immediately they brought up, well, okay, so if killing one person, if should you kill the murderer because then you're killing the person? And I said that's not utilitarian, that's deontological. And he was like, well, should you kill one person to make, or should you what? And then I remember what they brought up. They brought up slaves, and I was like, well, slaves might help some of the class, but you can immediately pull up like Greece or Rome, where there were more slaves than people, and the majority were suffering for the benefit of the few, and the benefit of the few most likely did not outweigh the suffering of the many. And then it was he brought up the United States and cotton industry and having slaves to farm, and I was like, well, think of how many people suffered and died just so maybe like 10 people would work on one farm that would lower the prices by maybe 1/100th of a cent. And it's I did say that you will never know the actual ramifications of your utilitarian idea until long after it's finished, but you can't just use it to justify awful things and say that, well, it benefits more. Because at the base of utilitarianism, you have to apply it in real life. You have to have infallible rights that everyone can live by or live with. And that was what I tried to establish. And the opponent in this conversation is a devout Christian and a Republican who is going to take the deontological approach because that is how they were taught, and that's how a lot of Christian Republicans go. Because, and then we tried to point out like, well, what makes your religion better and all of that stuff, and it always defaulted back to because I think it is, or because I know it is, because God said so.
Because
And then
my
I was like,
mommy told me God said so.
yeah, yeah. I didn't even try to question like whether or not he had questioned his religion, because that can always lead into an interesting conversation of, well, yeah, obviously I did, and it's like, well, did you?
Yeah.
And it was,
I don't know, it's, but I mean, you do know liberal education is about freeing up your mind from stuff like that, right?
yeah.
So,
There was a huge red flag, and he was like, my mom bet me $1,000 that I would end up as a liberal when I'm done with college. And me and Alexis both looked at each other and we were like, you have to be kidding me. That's not real, right? Because that's a bit of a red flag when somebody, especially because conservatism is now the counterculture movement. It's no longer liberalism like it was in the 70s. It is now conservatism. And it's a little scary sometimes.
yeah. Well, abortion is a classic case of deontology versus utility, right? For the sake of the principle of the unborn, the consequences are awful, not just for women, but for wicked politicians that hide behind that and then go and cut taxes for the rich, promote fossil fuels. I mean, all the stuff they do behind that fig leaf. That's really annoying. So anyway, all right. So I guess the punchline here is that what we've done so far is understandable, fits together. It's, well, Berger talks about vision, right? Sight. And Longinus talks about speech. but there's also a visual side. You see a person speaking, you know,
Yeah.
and but and then Berger. Okay, so Collingwood and Longinus and the Greek view is that there are these higher levels of conscious awareness and all that. Whereas Berger is mostly deconstruction, right? But I mean, it does expose a lot of pseudo art and a lot of ways that art is used as a cultural phenomenon that justifies power and privilege. So it's good, you know, to cut through the crap. It's just that when you throw the baby out with the bathwater, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And also, there's a reason to tie down a vision, a site with some sort of reasoning or account. And Berger, I don't know, he's just sort of analyzing images, right? And he's sort of telling you you can Xerox off any image you want, put on your bulletin board, and it functions for you just as an image. There's no account, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, somebody downloads a bunch of Nazi swastikas, just an image, you know, I have a right. Yeah, it's kind of, there's no accountability there, which again is somewhat worrisome, but you have to go. Do you have class at 9?
I don't have class at 9. I usually send it to work, but work is flexible. As long as I can get in like an hour and a half today, I'm fine. So I'm not in any rush.
Well, any other closure, any other things you want to mention?
I think speeches are one of my favorite medium. I think they're always really exciting, and they can also, because they are one of the most accessible mediums, especially nowadays, they have a lot of power.
Yes.
But the problem is that there are so many people waiting for a single speech to just pick it apart. I think it goes into Roosevelt's, if you just use your muckraker, you become the
Right.
potent people. Um, so even though it is such an accessible medium, even with literacy rates being higher than they've ever been, it speeches are still an incredibly important thing. I mean, we have so many of them with politicians because they work and they can get a point across.
It's just sad though when some politicians really want to appeal to the desire for a middle class, you know, and a
Yeah,
mature emotion. And then they spend most of the speech giving an argument, right?
yeah,
I mean, you're treating human beings like rational animals. And then if the public doesn't want it, like it prefers emotional, right?
yeah,
Just like just like the Greeks, right? They liked
yeah,
Ion, who clearly was his one motive was to tap into emotions. And the public loved him, even when what his motives were money and personal glory and power, like he's a jerk. But they don't look deeper than that, right? I think it's similar to Trump quoting the Bible or something, right?
yeah.
It's pretty scary. Um, but that's why Plato wrote these dialogues to kind of alert us, say,
Yeah,
hey, we're making the same mistakes. Like,
yeah.
maybe we should learn something. Um, but I guess I'll give up. I'll go to bed.
Get some
Uh,
sleep. You're sick. You gotta heal.
yeah, but I hope that's enough for you. I hope you're